Hello everyone. Welcome to our Institution of Global Professionals free webinar. Thank you for all of you joining with us in this marvelous moment. And my humble request everyone, please stay with us till our program. My dear lovely audience, I'm your host today, myself Nasrin Michel, and I'm from Bangladesh. Currently, I'm studying MSc in Psychology in National University in my country. My dear lovely audience, I'm proud to be associated with IGP as a global member, and I feel respected and privileged to host this webinar. It's my delight to welcome all of you to our Institution of Global Professionals free webinar. Thanks all of you once again for joining with us in this event. My request to everyone, please share this webinar with your friends, with your family, tag them and also mention them in our comment box so then everyone can know about this today's webinar. My dear lovely participants, don't forget, once again, I'm reminding you, don't forget to tag, share, and mention your friends in our comment box. So let's watch together and learn together because we believe that power is gained by sharing knowledge, not hoarding it. Once again, I'm your host and I'm a member of IGP. Myself, Nisha. Um, Welcome all of you. My dear lovely participants, every day we have some new participants who joined with us. So let me give you a little concept about IGP. Institution of Global Professionals serves student and community resource, providing holistic and social work and education for create a proficient generation. IGP also leading on online skill development institute with thousands of learners worldwide. We make it get at able to use for every knowledge seeker to originate personality, more ambitious, make confident to face any circumstance and develop own skills. We are entrusted with international recognition. My dear lovely participants, let me tell you more about IGP. Institute of Global Professionals is an educational institution provides social work. We believe that it's not effective to increase one's skills just by acquiring formal education. So we provide effective training and consultation to generate proficient generation all over the world. We organized webinar, training, online offline courses, etc. by based and trained speakers, coaches from all over the world to create a best learning platform for all of you. Our mission is to empower people and enhance. We have already completed our 507 number webinar. Today I'm presenting webinar number 508. Before inviting our speaker, once again, I want to share with you and I want to remind all of you to share this event, tag your friends, mention them in our comment box. My dear lovely participants, before starting our speaker's presentation, let me announce a new thing about our program, our quiz competition session. Before starting our program, let me tell you about this. We have a surprise announcement. That is, from today, uh, will give 20 certificates to 20 top 20 winners. So this is a really surprising announcement for all of you, my dear lovely participants. Please share and mention your friends so that they can know about this. Okay, now let's welcome our honorable speaker from India. Let's welcome our honorable speaker, Dr. Samhita Bharadwaj. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, you can start your presentation here.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, IGP, for inviting me to deliver a talk on this topic. And thank you everyone who have taken the time out to attend to my talk today. Um, without further ado, let me start my presentation. Okay. Can you see the slides? Can you? Okay. Thank you, Nasrin. Thank you for confirming. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about the linguistics, teaching linguistics in an English literature department, which is basically, based out of my journey as a teacher, as a student, teacher, researcher, in the field of linguistics. So, yeah. Okay, before going further, let me give you an outline to my talk. So I'll start with an introduction. I'll start with my own personal journey, which should also be like an introduction of myself, and then I'll go to the top main topics of the talk, which are the challenges. So I'll be focusing on the challenges of challenges of teaching linguistics in a literature class, because that's the topic of the talk. Why is it a challenge, or what are the challenges that may occur when you know teach linguistics in a literature class. And when I say literature, I'm focusing on English literature based on my experience of teaching linguistics in an English department. And then I'll talk about how we can address these challenges, and then I'll talk about how we can, how we can solve this issue, and bridging the gap. That exists between language and literature is one way to go about it. But that's the main way to go about it, is what I'm going to suggest. And I'll then go into if the solutions that I'm going to suggest are really effective. We are also going to examine that, and then finally I'll lay down the benefits of bridging this gap, as in why should we even care to bridge the gap between language and linguistics, language and literature, and why should we care about this topic, so if there is a benefit at all of bridging the gap, and taking this effort of trying to teach linguistics in a literature class, should we teach the subject in a more effective way. So these are some of the you know topics that I'm going to focus on today, and I'll start with my personal journey. So let me go to the next slide. um, Okay, I hope the slides are visible. Nasrin, can you confirm again? Okay, I'm assuming that you can see the slides. Okay. All right. This has been this has been my journey in teaching learning. So I studied linguistics in the master's level in Guwahati University, Assam, which Assam is a state in India, eastern northeast part of India, and so I my journey of exploring languages, learning about languages, learning to study languages rather. It started with Guwahati University, Assam, where I was taught the subject in the master's level, and we do not have the subject in the graduate level. In fact, that's something I'm going to talk about later. So most of the universities in India do not have linguistics in the UG or undergraduate level. It is only taught in the postgraduate or master's level. So this was in the year 2008, and then after my master's, I worked for about more than a year. In fact, I was engaged with a project on various aspects of my mother tongue Assamese from an NLP, or I'll explain these terms later, in a computational linguistic project in CIIL, which is a pioneering institute of promoting languages, or scheduled and non-scheduled languages of India. So I worked there on various aspects of my language, my mother tongue Assamese, such as dictionary making, which is more technically known as lexicography, and then building different kinds of data or corpus, digital data, the corpus, and various other aspects like morphology, speech data. It was both written and speech data that I worked on, and basically we came up with you know a, an annotated or analyzed corpus of Assamese at the end of it, and the project is still ongoing. I worked only till 2010, because after that I wanted to prepare for my PhD, and so then I was busy with my research, and then I started my PhD in Northeastern Hill University, Shillong. And my topic of research was on typology, which is a branch of linguistics that studies the types of languages based on the features that a language exhibits, or languages exhibit, the common features. So my my research topic involved working with three languages, my own, that is Assamese, and also Bodo and Rabha. And then I examined a linguistic feature called classifier in all these three languages from a typological point of view. How this feature in these three languages are affected by the contact among these languages, how they affect, how they have influenced each other. And I saw that in I tried to understand that in my research. So during the course of my research, I also had to take up classes as a teaching assistant, in the Department of Linguistics. So there again, it was a PG class. Like I said earlier, the subject linguistics is not only a few universities in India. In fact, two or three universities have it in the undergraduate level. The rest of it is only introducing the subject. It has the subject only in the master's level. So yeah, so I taught the PG students of linguistics, and that was for a year. And So yeah, I have highlighted the word linguistics in a linguistics department because I also taught following my PhD, I also taught linguistics in a university called University of Science and Technology, Meghalaya. I joined there as an assistant professor in the Department of English, but I was responsible for teaching linguistics and some allied kind of subjects in of literature, such as you know communicative English. So basically, I taught communicative English and linguistics. I also took up took up a poetry paper, modern poetry, and I also took up forms of literature. Basically history of English literature. And some drama. So I did teach both literature and linguistics, but my focus was definitely on linguistics and the topics of literature which had to do with languages or language in general. So I taught in University of Science and Technology Meghalaya for 3 years, and then I moved to Tezpur University, Assam, which is I should mention in USTM, University of Science and Technology Meghalaya, I got the opportunity to teach the subject in both UG and PG level. It is a private university, and unlike the government universities, some of the private universities in India are taking the initiative of introducing linguistics even in the UG level. USTM is was fortunately one of them, and I had a good time teaching linguistics there, but I found a lot of differences. My experience of teaching linguistics as a teaching assistant in Nehu Shillong, that is Northeastern Hill University Shillong, in a linguistics department, versus my experience of teaching the subject in a literature department in USTM. By literature department, I mean English literature department. There were a lot of differences, between these two experiences, and that is what has actually, prompted me to think about the differences and challenges and solutions. That is basically the reason behind I'm here to talk about this topic today. Okay, so after that, I joined Tezpur University, Assam, and on a research as a research associate, to gain some post PhD experience. And so there I taught, I both taught and researched on English as a second language. So the study was on the engineering students of the university, and the first and third semester students. And so I taught English as a English as a basically communicative English, English as a second language. I taught the subject as well as I experimented different teaching methods on them. The basic idea behind the project was to explore how motivation can affect. Apart from language, the aptitude or ability of a person to of a student to learn a new language, how does motivation in a classroom can influence how a student can how fast a student can learn a language. So that was kind of our goal. And I joined almost at the end of the project, and we are still we're still analyzing the data, and yet to come into some definite conclusion. But from our experience, we from whatever analysis have been done, it can be confirmed that motivation did play a role. We could see a lot of influence of motivation, in the process of the learners learning the language English as a second language, right? So okay. Anyway, this is my journey, and the reason I have given you this long introduction is because the topic that I'm going to deliver today is heavily based on my experience as a teacher, both as a student of linguistics, and also I should mention, I was taught English literature in my undergraduate course. So English was my major subject. So I'm kind of trained both in literature and linguistics, and then my PhD was, of course, and further research was in linguistics. And so today I'm going to talk about the differences that I have observed, and what kind of challenges I faced when I taught linguistics in a literature department, and how and what kind of what kind of realizations I arrived at as to how to solve the problem. I'm going to share my experience basically, and some of my hopefully some of my kind of solutions to tackle the problem with you all. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I'm not very sure if all of you are from linguistics here. So I'll just take you through a brief summary of some of the basic concepts in linguistics and the literature. I'm assuming most of you are familiar with these concepts, but I'll still give you a short overview. Okay, so uh, let's define linguistics and literature. So, what is linguistics? Linguistics is, now there are different ideas. When I say I'm a linguist or I'm studying languages, usually the first question that I come across is how many languages can you speak? And that is actually not what linguistics is all about. What linguistics is all about is a study, studying languages. Now, when I say language, it can be one particular language, it can be two, three different languages, or it can be a language, the concept of language as a whole. So I'll of course take you through those concepts as well. But it is a scientific study of language, which means that we heavily rely on empirical data, observable data, and then we analyze them. We record the data. We go to field work. We go to field. We meet actual speakers of the language. We collect data from them. There are different ways how we can, get the natural data, and then we analyze that and come into certain conclusions. That is what basically linguistics is all about. Now there are different sub branches which I'll talk about. Now, when I say language, it can be in linguistics. When I say it studies language, it can be both spoken and written language. In fact, there is a priority for spoken language. Linguists are more concerned with speech than writing, and there is a reason behind that actually. Because speech, we kind of because speech is considered to be more primary than writing, because it is speech that writing is based on, right? You may know there are many languages in the world which do not have a script, right? But they are languages in their own right. And so having a script is not a criterion to consider or to determine the status of of a speech as language or not. It doesn't make it it doesn't make it a less of a language. So speech is more primary, and which is why linguistics is more concerned with speech than writing. Okay. um, Okay, but if we look at literature, there are various definitions available of what is literature. This is a very commonly understood idea that I'm sharing here, that it is a body of written work. So writing is very, essential, or writing is, written writing or written language. That is what literature is mostly, concerned with, and that is what usually people understand literature to be. Of course, I would argue that oral studying oral languages are also as important, but this is usually what popular perception of literature, as far as literature goes. This is what the popular opinion is, that it is a study of written works. And there are different genres, of course. We can look at a novel, a poem, a drum, a play, a short story. It can be based on imagination. It can be, it can report some incident. So there are different kinds of literature, but usually it's based on writing. I mean, based on written language, and there are. So yeah, there are different genres, and there are different languages. So when I say literature, of course, a literature, it means a body of written works, but there are there are different literatures. For example, there is English literature, there is Hindi literature, there is Bengali literature, there is Filipino literature. So there are different languages in the world, and most of the languages which are which have a script, or which are written, they have literature in their own languages. But then we often forget that a lot of languages are not actually written down. They do not have a script, and but that doesn't mean that those communities who speak those languages do not have a literature, right? From our own experience, because the world is growing multilingual day by day. We do not speak just one, at least in India, where I come from. There are many languages spoken around us, and we see that a lot of these languages do not have a script, but they have a very rich heritage. They have they have the folk tales. They have different cultural there are different forms of creative expressions, which are available in the form of a song, in the form of a riddle, in the form of a story, in the form of ballads. There are different. There is a rich, rich, like a source of this creative expressions that we can dig out. So yeah, so I'm just giving you the general idea, but then keep in mind that when we say literature, it is also oral literature. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the main branches of linguistics. So when we say, linguistics is the study of language, and language is not just one thing. It can be studied at different levels. So the most basic level that we can study language in, which is obvious from the discussion so far, is sound, right? I said that speech is primary to writing, and so how do we know that we are using languages? Because we are speaking the language every day, right? We all speak some language every day, one or more languages every day. And so when we study language, speech is the first thing that we study. So there is a distinction between sound and speech. So let's say opening a door, some noise, everything like is actually sound, but not every sound is part of language, right? A barking of a dog is not language, for example. So when we say language, we talk about human speech sounds, right? The sounds that we produce to talk, basically, the humans, with the help of different speech organs. So that is what phonetics, a branch of linguistics, study. So there is a difference between phonetics and phonology. Both deal with sounds, but phonetics deal with the physical properties of sounds. So, for example, how do we produce speech, right? What are the speech organs? For example, when I say ma, when I pronounce the sound ma, ma is a sound which is not just a sound, it's a speech sound, because I can give you examples, right? When I say the word mother, the first sound is ma, right? You can hear it. So ma is also a sound which children tend to learn, acquire very early. So ma is a sound, and so how am I pronouncing that sound? How am I producing that sound? My lips are in contact. There is a voicing, going on. So there are different ways the speech organs are interacting with each other to produce that sound. There is a way that I'm pushing the airs. My airstream is pushing the air out, and how the air from the larynx, how the airstream is coming out of my mouth. So all of that is part of production. It's called articulation. So that's called articulatory phonetics. I'll not go into a lot of detail, but phonetics is about that. So it's also about the acoustic properties. For example, how the sound waves travel from the speaker to the listener, in the through the medium of air. We can actually see the pitch variation, we can see the frequency, we can measure them, we can analyze them. There are different linguistic softwares available which can do that accurately. So those are all physical properties. Or how do we hear it, how do we perceive it, the loudness or softness, the yeah, all kinds of things. So those are part of phonetics, because they look at the physical property of the sound. But phonology is more concerned with how these different sounds are organized in a language. So for example, the phonology of English is different from the phonology of let's say Assamese, which is my language, because English language uses certain number of sounds which my language Assamese may not use. For example, the dental fricative, and we give different names based on how we produce the sounds, based on different criteria like voicing, place, and manner of articulation. So there are different names of the sounds like bilabial, fricative, labiodental, all of that. So let's say a fricative sound like v, as in van, that v sound is part of English phonology, right? English sound system has organized into its inventory that sound also. But in my language, you will not find that sound. V is not available in the sound inventory or phonetic inventory of Assamese. So phonology talks about those things. Also, like what kind of syllables are allowed, what kind of syllables are not allowed, what kind of sound combinations are possible. For example, again, there is a sound nga, which is velar nasal sound, which is very frequent in the word initial position. That means it can start a word in many languages. For example, in Boro, which is a language, Tibeto-Burman language from Assam, it, nga, nga can start a word, but you will not find that in Assamese, which belongs to different language family. I'll also talk about what language family means. Yeah. So even though the two languages are situated closely, they coexist, they are situated together in the same geographical area, doesn't mean that they will have the same, sounds. So the phonology studies these kind of things. What kind of combinations of sounds are possible? What kind of combinations of sounds are not possible in a particular language? How to so consonants and vowels. How do we arrange that? So here, when we say consonants, vowels, we are not talking about the letters, we're talking about the sounds. So there is a distinction between sound and letter that we make in linguistics. Okay, let's move to the next level, which is the level of word, right? If you look at from the bottom up, if you go from the most basic level, that is sound, then if you go one level up, then you'll what do sounds do? When sounds combine, they make syllables, and when syllables combine, what do? They they form words, right? So for example, ma, and na, these are three different sounds, right? Ma is a consonant sound, is a vowel sound, na is a nasal consonant again in English. Now the way if I choose to organize, or I choose to organize it in the order of ma, and na, I get the word man. right? But if I do not if I put na in the beginning and ma in the middle and a at the end, nma, I cannot even pronounce the word. It is not a word in English. So you can see that sounds, combine to make words. Okay, now, so words are again combined. Words also. So in phonology, we study sounds as the unit of, as the smallest unit. In morphology, where we study words, and we study how words are formed. It's not We do not study sounds as a unit. We study what we call morphemes. So morphemes are smaller units which have meaning of their own, and they combine to make a word. So a morpheme can be a word in itself, or it may not be a word. So I'll give you an example again. So if I say, you know. If I say national, for example, right? Nation is a word in English. Nation is also a morpheme in English, because you cannot break the morpheme nation, or the word nation, into smaller parts, right? If you can, but it will not have a meaning. So the smallest unit we can break a word into without violating its meaning is called morpheme. And morphemes combine to make words, right? So nation is the smallest. Nation is a morpheme. It is also a word. If you add what we call a suffix l, which do not have a meaning of its own, but it can combine with other morphemes to give different kinds of meaning. For example, when it adds to nation, it makes the word national. When it adds to emotion, it makes the word emotional, right? So L is a morpheme, which is not a word, but nation is a morpheme, which is also a word, right? So anyway, so that's how we, form words, and there are different processes of how we do that. Those things are, studied in morphology. Then we move to syntax, where we study how sentences are formed. So we have the knowledge of words, how they are formed. Now, how do they form sentences? Again, we talk about how these combinations happen, how there are different structures, all of that. I'll not go into much detail. Then we also, in each of these levels, phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, there is one common element, which is meaning, because without meaning, a language is useless. So there is a sub branch of linguistics which studies meaning in all these levels, that is called semantics. And then we have what we know as pragmatics, which goes one step ahead of sentences. So that basically looks at not just the sentences as in terms of the structure of it, like a clause or a phrase, but not just the grammar of it, not just the rules, which combine the words together into a string of words into a sentence, or in following different rules, but it also look at the context, right? Pragmatics is all about context. So for example, if you call me, and if I say, if you get a call and somebody says hello, and, you respond with a hello, and if the speaker asks you, can I speak to your mother, for example, you will say, depending on, or is your mother there, you will not just say yes or no, but you'll understand that the person wants to speak to your mother, right? So that is not expressed explicitly, but that is something that you understand from the context, because somebody calling you, if I can speak to your mother, is not asking for permission, but indicating that they want to speak to your mother. So that kind of understanding. So there are different processes of meaning, so the meaning actually can be understood only from the context. If you just look at the structure, in this case, for example, can I speak to your mother? If you just look at the structure of the sentence, you will not understand the meaning that the person wants to speak to your mother. Or if I say, watch out, there is a dog. You'll know, or there is a tiger, you'll not just stand there and just watch, right? You'll also know that I am indicating you to kind of be aware, and save yourself, right? Otherwise you'll be eaten. So that kind of knowledge are very important, so in the day-to-day conversation we use a lot of meaning which are unsaid or implied, which are not directly expressed but implied, indicated, or hinted. So that kind of meaning is the subject matter of pragmatics, a very important branch. There are different processes that it studies, in the level of discourse. So whether it's a written text or whether it's a long paragraph that you are speaking, a connected speech, that is, different sentences are spoken together, as a whole. There are different, this kind of minute information which might go missing if you do not consider in what situation, or in with what kind of attitude the speaker has, what kind of situation it is spoken in, what kind of presupposition, that is, what kind of understood or what kind of assumed, meaning that is shared between the speaker and the listener. All of that, or turn taking, how to speak, how to listen, when to stop, when to listen. All of these kind of things are, subject matter of pragmatics. Okay. So there are other branches of linguistics. Here are some: historical linguistics, sociolinguistics. You can see the list. There are more. In fact, linguistics is a very, it has a very big, broad scope. There are new subjects, new allied branches, new branches coming up every day. But historical linguistics, I should talk about for a minute, because this is something that has been responsible for a change of, how we study language, how linguistics study is oriented. At least the modern linguistics is, oriented. Historic, prior to the kind of foundation of historical linguistics, uh, there was not, there was an attitude that, writing or literary language, that is, language which is used for literary purposes, writing literature, only that was important. The spoken language were considered, or dialects of different languages, those were, or informal use of language was considered kind of inferior, and not very important, subjects of study. But with historical linguistics, things changed. Now, what is historical linguistics? Historical linguistics study language change. Now, there was an understanding. Scholars have been realizing this. Scholars had realized that languages do change. There was an understanding that, ancient, the modern languages in Europe, for example, did come from some kind of ancient language. For example, English, modern English came from the languages spoken in the Anglo-Saxon period. So that kind of understanding was there, but the fact that those changes can be studied, and the idea that those, they can be studied because those changes are not just random or haphazard, but very systematic, very regular. There are patterns that we can, discover, and study them. That kind of understanding was not there. So historical linguistics, changed that. There was a group of scholars, who are known as neo-grammarians. So this is in the 19th century, and most of it happened in the early 19th century. Neo-grammarian school of linguists are very important in this regard. So they hypothesize that sound changes are slow, but they're not, they're gradual, but they're regular. They can be studied. So so historical linguistics changed the way we study language. So it brought to the forefront the need to study spoken language, because it is only and also the fact that, because prior to that, Latin, for example, classical languages like Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, those were considered, they still, of course, enjoy the prestige, but those were only deemed to be important enough to be studied. And but the link between different languages and other languages which might have come from them, but in what way, or what are the relationship between languages which have come from Sanskrit or Latin, for example, that they share in between them. Those kind of ideas did not take place. So historical linguistics gave us a very interesting idea called comparative method, through which we can look at a set of sounds. We can look at a set of words which are similar, and then we can look at the sounds and morphology. We can look at the syntax, and we can look at basically the sound correspondences and see how actually the sound changes have taken place. And based on that, we can decide which languages are connected, which languages are different, in the world. For example, if you look at India, languages like Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi are more similar to each other than, let's say, languages like, Boro and Hindi are, for example. So that kind of differences, or that have given us new insights onto how we can discover the patterns of languages, and how we can see what languages are connected and what are not. And the idea of language family also came about from there. That languages are related, as the metaphor of family was applied to the study of languages. And how a language comes from a common or ancestor language, which is called the proto language. For example, Indo-European, there is a proto-Indo-European language from where all the Indo-European languages have descended, including English. So French, English, German, Greek, Latin, Sanskrit. The reason that there are so many common words, common vocabulary that these languages share. For example, the word for father is similar to the Greek word pater. So or the Sanskrit word Pitar, right? So all these similarities, these are discussed, and then from there on, so it's not just the similarity of words, but also the similarity of sounds, and how the changes have shown them. We can actually prove them that they are similar or they're related. So with that idea, we have discovered different language families, in the world. So languages like English, Hindi, Assamese, Marathi. These are, for example, in the Indo-European family. Within that family, then there are different sub-branches. For example, English is in the Indo-Iranian branch, but Hindi is in Indo-Aryan branch, right? Or Indic branch. Similarly, Chinese, Korean, these languages belong to the Tibeto-Burro Sino-Tibetan language family, and then there are the Dravidian language family. So languages spoken in the south of India, like Tamil, Telugu, Kannada. All of these belong to the Dravidian group. Then there is Austroasiatic languages. There are Mon Khmer branch of languages. In Meghalaya, in the northeast of India, there is a language called Khasi, which belongs to the Mon Khmer sub-branch of Austroasiatic. So, and that kind of knowledge. Then there is Tai Kadai languages, languages spoken in Thailand, languages spoken in Vietnam. There are different branches there, and similarly, languages spoken in the Philippines. There are different branches and sub-branches, and within these branches, again, in fact, linguists are still studying, because there are a lot of languages which are still not described. Let me share that with you. So, with more description of these individual languages, we'll come to know about even more relations between these languages. Now, you may ask, why should we care how languages are related or not? That's because if we know that, let's say, three languages are similar, they come from the same family. When we study them, we can take a few things for granted. Not exactly take for granted, but we can at least look for certain features. We can expect certain linguistic features to be present in the language. So that way, the burden of analyzing and organizing, linguistic analysis becomes easier. So so historical linguistics is a a huge sub-branch of linguistics. It is one of the oldest sub-branches, and it is a very important sub-branch as you speak. So, okay. Then we have social linguistics. Again, this is very important also in the context of today's talk. I'll explain more why, but later. But social linguistic studies the role of language, as in how language is, language plays a role in society. Like how language is not something which is spoken in isolation. It is not an individual phenomenon, but it is something which is affected by social processes, or it is something that can affect the way society functions. So social linguistics is a very important branch of linguistics. And languages keep changing. I already mentioned that. And societies keep changing. We know that, right? The customs change, the ideas, the attitudes, they keep changing with modern technology, with with new information, with new cultural and geographical patterns emerging. Society keep changing, and with new thoughts and ideas, new philosophies. So with that, language also changed. The way we use language. For example, if you look at a recent phenomenon, a few years back, we did not have words like quarantine, used this frequently, right? Words like COVID, with the pandemic, we have come across so many new words. COVIDiot is a coinage that has come across as a result of this pandemic. So, that kind of changes reflect in language. Language is a good reflection of what's going on in the society, what's going on in the culture. If you want to, see the nerve of, you want to measure the nerve of society and culture, you should have a look at the language. Especially if you look at newspapers and magazines, you'll see changes reflected. Okay, then psycholinguistics is the study of linguistic sub-branch of linguistics, which examines the connection between language and mind. Different how our mind, the processes in psychology, how our psychological behavior gets reflected in language, or how language influences our thinking. There is a very famous theory called language relativity, which Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is a more extreme version of this idea that language can indeed affect thought. Yeah, so there are different interesting ideas in psycholinguistics as well. And then we can talk about ethnolinguistics or anthropological linguistics. Actually, they are very connected. So, um, um, social linguistics, and like I said, it's the idea of how language functions in a society, and ethnolinguistics is about how language functions within a culture. And anthropology, as you know, is the study of human behavior, human race, the cultural and the physical aspects of humanity, human society and culture. So all of these are kind of concerns, because language is a concern of all of these branches. But when we say ethnolinguistics, or when we say anthropological linguistics, we are looking at we are focusing on the language, the analysis of language, and how different cultural social factors play a role in that. Okay. So then we also have computational linguistics. So that examines the role of technology, information technology, in language, how we can, how language is used to basically train the computer to process things better, to process data better, to be able. So that's the ambition of machine learning. The goal is to make to feed so much language data into the computer that it is able to achieve some human-like cognition, some human-like understanding of language, and as a result, is can serve humanity better. Different kinds of computational applications. For example, the announcements that you get to hear railway stations or airports, a lot of mechanical applications. So those are products of computational linguistics. Computational linguistics also help us preserve big data, build large corpus of language data, and store them and then analyze them more efficiently. So yeah, so the basic idea is how technology can help 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 in the growth of language, and how language can help better technologies to emerge, which can help in the communication of between human to human and human to machine, right? So that's basically how communication processes can become more smooth, more effective. That is the concern of computational linguistics. Okay. Then we have neurolinguistics, which examines the connection between language and the brain, the neural networks, through different MRIs and all of that. It studies the role that language plays in the brain, and how that affects the way we speak or use language. How then there is clinical linguistics, which is more applied in the sense that it investigates how we can how we can use the knowledge from linguistics to diagnose and treat patients which are whose linguistic abilities are affected. Different kinds of speech disorders, for example, which may be due to an accident, trauma. So that kind of patients may be treated with by clinical linguists. Doctors, basically this is an interdisciplinary field where medical practitioners work hand in hand with linguists, and with the understanding of language patterns and structure, they're able to diagnose what exactly has gone wrong in a patient, and how better to treat them. So this is clinical linguistics, an emerging field and very important. Then we have stylistics. So stylistics is something which connects language and literature, because statistics studies how language can be used to achieve a certain style. So how language can be used to create a more effective communication, how it can give a certain effect. For example, the language that we use in poetry is often more what we say poetic in layman's term. It is more artistic or more aesthetically pleasing, right? Of course, that's not what it is all about, but I'm saying that's also an aspect, right? So this is there is a certain style to it. So these kind of ideas are discussed in stylistics. So we can analyze poem. It's not just poetry. We can look at other genres of literature also. And so this is what stylistics does. It helps us analyze there are different the language tools that are used to achieve certain effect in literature, or in basically in written or oral literature. Okay, I'll talk about it more. Maybe I should give you an example at this point. For example, rhymes or alliteration. When we speak, we do not rhyme, right? When we just speak, but in poem, not all poems rhyme. There are poems written in free verse, but poems that rhyme. So that rhyming is also it is not. It is a conscious effort by the poet to choose words that rhyme with each other. Now, what is rhyming? To understand that, we need to know what phonetics is, because rhyming is a property of sound, I mean, rhyming is a operation of phonetics, because we need to know what syllable is. It's the structure of syllables that we are looking at when we say two words rhyme. The end part of the word are rhyming. So there are different other assonance, consonants. There are different other devices like metaphors when we compare two unrelated things, or when we compare two things, two associated things like metonymy. When I say the crown spoke, instead of saying the queen spoke, the word crown is representing the idea of queen or king here. So that is metonymy. So there are different, literary devices like that, which help us use language in a certain way, a more effective way. There are foregrounding, there is foreshadowing. All of that are concerns of stylistics. Okay. Then we come to language documentation, which is very important, and I'll talk about it in my next slides. It is important from the point of view of today's talk. So, yeah. So, language documentation is related to language endangerment. Okay. So, to understand why, okay. So, when we say language documentation, we talk about preserving and basically preserving a language, keeping a language alive. So, to understand why we need to do that, or why languages die in the first place, or how can we even lose a language? We need to know what language endangerment is. And language endangerment is a very very relevant topic in today's world. Um, you know, Although we speak a lot of languages, there are a lot of languages spoken in the world, but there are, at the same time, there are a lot of languages which are dying, which we are losing, in less than a month. Language endangerment is an important idea to understand. So, what is an endangered language? What do we mean by a language in danger? So, how do we decide that? One way to know that is to use the categories or the scale that UNESCO has given us, which is different degrees of language endangerment. So when we say a language is endangered, we mean that it is, likely to become extinct in near future. It is in some level of danger. Either it is going to be it is going to totally vanish from society, or it is spoken but not spoken so much. So any language spoken by less than 10,000 people are known, are termed as potentially endangered by UNESCO. So, so these are the levels, categories on the basis of which we can measure endangerment: vulnerable, definitely endangered, severely or critically endangered. So, what is vulnerable? So a language is vulnerable when most children speak the language, but only in certain domains. So there are different domains of language use, right? We speak language with our family. We can speak it with our friends, with acquaintances, in the workplace, in the market, in public domain, basically personal and public domain. So when that happens, when speaking language, using language is restricted only to the home, only to certain domains, more private domains like home or a few friends, then we can, that should raise suspicion. That should alarm us. Perhaps the language is going towards endangerment, or is actually endangered, is going towards a loss. So that is the point. We need to be really interested in the language, to kind of to revive the language. It is the time to take an interest in the language. So of course that happens for various reasons. I'll come to that. But this is what vulnerably endangered means, following UNESCO's scale. Then definitely endangered languages are those where which are you know spoken as mother tongue in the home, which are actually, children do not learn them as mother tongues. The parents speak the language, the grandparents speak the language, but the children, they do not speak it like a mother tongue. They may know it a little bit, but they do not use it as their mother tongue. So that's definitely endangered. Then there are severely endangered languages where the languages are spoken by grandparents and older generations. The parents may understand the language, but they do not speak the language with their children or among themselves. Now this is you know some of you might have experienced this, or some of you might have questions as to why that happens, right? Why would somebody not use their mother tongue? There are different factors. So the most common thing is, of course, attitude, the language attitude. uh, Due to political, preferences, or I mean, based on the language policy, certain languages are marginalized. Certain languages are given more importance, and or they have been, more developed in the sense of their presence in, various domains, newspapers, magazines, and or by dint of having a script also, because a lot of languages do not even have script. So those languages are kind of invisible. They become invisible, and speakers often, do not associate pride with speaking those languages, and so that could be a reason why, even their own a lot of speakers hesitate to speak their own mother tongues. When, especially when a dominant, in the presence of a community where the, dominant speakers of, the dominant language speakers are around, they often hesitate or feel shy. I personally encountered that kind of experience. So a lot of tribes, for example, in Assam, if you go to the tea gardens in Assam, a lot of languages like Mundari, Santali, Khariya, those are languages which are, people hesitate to speak those languages, especially with a more dominant language speaker. For example, I speak Assamese, so and Assamese is the dominant language in the state. So they kind of hesitate to, they switch to Assamese, instead of, even when they speak among themselves in my presence. So that's not a good thing, the negative attitude towards their language. But we cannot blame the speakers. It also has to do with the language policy, and how much of description is available in the language. Because what happens is, when the language is studied, when there are written materials available, the speakers automatically feel a sense of pride, in speaking the language. So it is very important to instill that sense of pride, to make them feel comfortable to use their own language. And that is exactly what language documentation is all about. Language revitalization is all about. There are different ways we can do that. Okay, so there are many severely endangered languages, even in India, and then there are critically endangered languages where the youngest speakers are the grandparents. Grandparents are the last generation speaking that language basically, and um, you know and then we, of course, talk about language death or language loss, where a language is no more spoken. So some languages, for example, in the Ahom languages, the Ahom language of Assam, only a few families speak the language. Or Ruga language in Meghalaya, there is just a speaker or two available to speak the language. Most people do not know how to speak the language. So yeah, yeah. So great. So those are critically endangered language. Uh, I hope. Am I? Could somebody confirm if I'm audible? It's raining actually here. I hope my voice is audible. Okay, thank you, Nasri. Okay, okay, let me continue. Okay, so what do we do about that? We cannot let languages die. So I was talking about language loss. So those are the four levels of language endangerment, and then it may go extinct. So a lot of languages in the Andaman Nicobar island have, that has happened to language of Andaman Nicobar Island. And a group of scholars from JNU have studied that, under the guidance of Professor Anita Abdi. And a lot of revitalization work have been done. So what do you do when that happens? In fact, the ideal situation is we should not wait for a language to be endangered. We should do the language description. That is why linguistics is so important, because you know if we don't study, or if we do not describe a language, even if it's a preliminary description, it is very useful, because you know um, any source of writing, any source of dictionary or grammar is important because it helps the new generations to learn the language if they're interested. So, for example, a severely endangered language speaker, if he or she wants to learn the language, how do they do that? Because if there is no resources available, so those preliminary language sketches are also very important in that regard. In the Northeast India, for example, so many languages are going towards extinction. During my PhD, I worked with two endangered languages. One is Boro, one is Rabha. Boro is, of course, a lot more developed than Rabha. There are a lot of resources available now. They're progressing really well. So that's a good sign in terms of language revitalization. But Rabha is severely endangered. In fact, some of the varieties of Rabha. So when I say variety, I mean different. What is commonly known as dialects, different ways of regional based variation of the same language. Some variations of Rabha, some varieties of Rabha, you know uh, speakers, I mean, they do not know their language anymore. So they have switched to a link language called Rabhamis, which is a pidgin. I'll explain what a pidgin is. So so they have switched to Assamese, which is this more dominant language. So these are not good signs, and we should act before that happens. Um, Okay, so and so when I was talking about resources, so when you reach a when you study a language when it's that already in the at that risk of extinction, even a small resource can be very handy. For example, in a lot of these minority languages of Northeast India, or in India, in fact, I would say, speak more about Northeast Indian languages, which are also, Northeast India is a hub of what is known as the Tibeto-Burman group of languages in the world. It's most of these languages are scattered here, and most of these languages are endangered, right? So, but a lot of missionaries have worked with grammars and dictionaries, very brief sketches of languages, of these languages. So all of these are very handy when somebody like me or some other linguist, when they go and study these languages, at least they have some guidance. Often we do not even have guidance. For example, when I worked with a project. I worked with a various language documentation projects during my PhD, and one of these languages, there are two languages I worked for. One is Karbong, one is Tehran. So those are mother tongues identified by the Mother Tongue Survey of India. Government of India, and there we were the first ones to actually work on those languages. So I was the first person to describe that language. So to produce enough work which should which should establish that they are in fact mother tongues. They are spoken as mother tongues, and they are indeed languages. And not just a random variation, or not just random hodgepodge or random combination of different words, but a language in its own right. So there are a lot of languages that need to be studied, and more linguists. We are actually, in a shortage of people who can study those, languages, because linguistics is as a subject, and that is why actually I'm so passionate about this topic, and which is why I decided to talk about it, is because there is a kind of a negative attitude to the study of linguistics in India, and I mean, in the level of academic, in academics, there is a neglect when it comes to linguistics, because people are yet to realize the extent of danger. A lot of these languages are in, and why we need to save languages. This kind of ideas are not as widespread as it should be. So anyway, we things are turning better, but a lot of work still needs to be done, and linguistics needs to be more emphasized in academics, because it would enable students, equip students to be able to do research on so many languages which are, and then save these languages from dying. Um, okay. I'll talk about why we need to save languages in the first place. But let me talk about what kind of work, how we do that. So, so language documentation is that field, field linguistics, language documentation, or language revitalization. So these are the usually terms that are applied. More or less, they are the same. They are concerned with recording and preserving languages through audio, video, different mediums, through also in the written form. So when, as a linguist, when we go in the field, we meet people. I already explained in the beginning. So we go with a recorder, a sound recorder, and then we collect as much natural speech as possible. There are different, we collect stories, we collect, narratives, we collect, their personal account, different kinds of data, sentences. We collect words also. There are word lists which are there. We go collect those words, the most frequently used words, and then we analyze them, and then we come, we write descriptions of those languages. So that is what language documentation is. So from there you can produce a grammar, you can produce a so when I say grammar, there are two kinds of grammars. One is prescriptive, one is descriptive. Descriptive grammars is basically what linguists do. We analyze the language as it is. We don't say what should be there, what should not be there, but we express, we examine, and we describe what is, how the native speakers at the moment are using the language, right? We do not preach what how they should use it, because we believe that native speakers are competent, and they are the authority in their languages, and yeah, so we can only analyze them. We cannot tell them what to do and how to use it better, also because we know that languages keep changing. So a lot of words which may not have been right in a few years back are now prevalent in the common use, and we cannot discard them. So yeah, so that is descriptive grammar. Prescriptive grammar are more preaching kind. They tell you, but there is merit in that also. If you want to learn a language, you will buy a prescriptive grammar, because there you will understand how to use the language, right? Prescriptive grammar gives you rules of correctness, as to how to use the language. So anyway, so this is what language documentation does. And language revitalization is something which is not just it doesn't stop at just documenting the language, but it also tries to preserve the language for generations to come. So it is not only about analyzing the language, it is not only collecting data which are in enough for describing the language, but also collecting data for from cultural and social, cultural domains, for example, which also give a sense of how the language, how the community, how, a picture of the community, of the culture of the community, how they go about their daily life, what kind of cultural items they use, what kind of what kind of architecture, for example. So all kinds of cultural things, what kind of practices, what kind of rituals that take place, all of this, how they express all of this in terms of language. And not just language, also pictures and videos of, for example, a dance in a festival can also be a topic of language revitalization. So we basically archive everything as much as we can. Um, the heritage, the culture and heritage, so that even if the language is extinct, someday the speakers can refer back to those and still can get a sense of how it was. And you know yeah, so that is what language revitalization is all about. And with the declaration of language. So you might know that UNESCO has declared had declared 2019 as the year of language, indigenous languages, and this decade, starting from 2022 to 2032, this decade is declared as the decade of indigenous communities, indigenous languages. To Because when we preserve, so that is why, that is the point I'll come to. Why should we preserve languages? Why are we doing all this work? Because when we lose so lots of language, what does it mean? So when we lose a language, we do not just lose words and sentences, we lose the whole traditional system. Okay. So there are a lot of, for example, words which, there are a lot of traditional knowledge about medicinal plants, for example. If you lose that, and you cannot translate, I mean, you as in somebody who's you know the speakers, they may not be able to tell you what that means in English, because it may not be, it may not be possible, because geographically there are different variations of plants, and one plant may not be available in some other geographical region, and English speaking regions, and so they may not be able to, they may be able to give you the scientific terms, which is why it also makes sense to you know do the zoological and botanical studies, to study flora and fauna and label them, so that we have this the knowledge of the systems intact, even if the language gets lost. So the traditional names and the traditional processes, how do you cure a certain disease, what are the because there is a lot of wisdom, there is a lot of wisdom in the indigenous communities who are in close touch with nature, right? So a group of people who are in close proximity of nature, who are dealing with various things in nature, and they will definitely have a more idea about how to go about it, and all that knowledge, all that years of experience, the knowledge that is that is verified by years of experience, all of that is preserved in the language. So if they lose the language, it is not just a loss for them, but also for the whole world, because we'll lose the knowledge of such a richness of flora and fauna, and we will also lose the knowledge of the culture. Every culture has something unique to offer, because what is a language but a worldview? A language reflects the way a community looks at the world. All of us bring our own unique ideas, about unique perspectives about how we look at the world, right? And as a society, as a community, there is definitely a lot that can be contributed, that can be yeah. So how a community looks at the world, that worldview is also expressed in language. So if you lose a language, the worldview is also lost, a loss of culture. So because of all of that, we need to preserve and document language, and language revitalization. Try to document languages, and as much as possible, try to record all of these, the picture in the form of pictures, in the form of videos, with proper labels. They try to preserve this kind of systems, the worldview, the knowledge systems, the heritage, basically. So that is what happens if we lose a language, and it is a reality, because every one language dies in 14 days. That is what is estimated. That is the sad reality of the time. And half of the world's 7,000 languages are expected to be extinct by the end of the century. So these are some scary data from UNESCO. And this is enough to actually warn us to take linguistics seriously, and language descriptions, documentation, and revitalization seriously. And the good news is, it's not only the linguist, but everyone can contribute. We can start with our families. We can start, if one of us, any of us, is a minority language speaker, we can start by encouraging our family to use the mother tongue. We can start encouraging our friends. We should once we realize the importance of why we need to use a language, why we need to preserve a language, or maintain a language, we'll be more willing and willing to use a language, right? So that is also something that we do as linguists. We try to spread this awareness among the minority language speakers, the indigenous communities, because the reason it is important is because when to have a sustainable world, if we want to achieve the sustainable development goals of UNESCO, then we really need to empower these communities. Because this is like a whole ecological system, and for it to thrive, the smaller languages have to thrive. So okay, um, yeah, and what about multilingualism in India? So even though there are so many languages dying, there are also a lot of languages spoken in India, in my country. So India is actually one of the what is called a linguistic area. It is recognized as a linguistic area because it has languages from many language families. I have already mentioned some, Tai-Kadai, Austroasiatic, Dravidian, Indo-Aryan, Tibeto-Burman, Mon Khmer, Munda groups, there's small and big groups. So in this subcontinent, we have that much of variety of languages, and you can see that only 22 of those languages are recognized as scheduled languages by the Constitution of India. And but 121 mother tongues are estimated to be spoken by 14 by spoken by millions, in the 2011 census. That was what came out. um, Sorry about the typo. The 14, that number is not right. Okay, and then there are 780 different languages. So if you just look at this data, you can see, uh, the gap. The recognized languages are only 22, which means that. So what does it mean when a language is recognized? I already kind of indicated that when a language is officially recognized, or recognized at the government level, then there is more development, there is more dictionary, there is more textbooks in that language. It is spoken, it is taught as a medium of instruction. There are more schools and colleges. There is more research in the language. So that way there is that language strives. But when a language is not recognized as such, and there are 780 different languages, and some of them are not even properly described. Like I myself have worked with two such languages, right? I already mentioned. So what about these languages? We need to urgently look into those, and we need to produce as much work as possible, because they are at the 400 of them are at the risk of dying, unfortunately. So India is a multilingual country, and multilingualism is our strength, because it the more languages we know, more competent we become, in terms of understanding the world, in terms of communicating with people. So yeah. There are benefits in terms of cognitive abilities. There are research which shows that knowing more languages is good for your mental health, also. And if I focus on Northeast India, which is where Assam is located, the state which that I come from, there are four. It's like a mini India in itself, because there are four language families in this region itself, and it is also at a very interesting junction between India and China. So we have a lot of influence, we have a lot of language contact happening. In the ancient times, there was a not so ancient times, actually. There was a silk route. It's called the Silk Route. There was a route from Assam to Burma, and a lot of trade ties used to happen, and there's trying to open up that the trade link again. Anyway, so there is a lot of cultural contact as well. both cultural and linguistic context. And in my PhD thesis, I tried to explore this context, that happening as a result of different language families being situated in the same region. So, for example, Assamese, my mother tongue, even though it's an Indo-Aryan language, there is a lot of influence from these Tibeto-Burman languages. So you would find Assamese very different from, not very different, but different to a large extent of from many other Indo-Aryan languages, let's say, Bengali, Oriya, or if you, especially with Hindi and more Western, kind of languages. There are many features which are not found in, related languages of Assamese, but have entered in Assamese from this other Tibeto-Burman and Austroasiatic group of languages, with which it shares a long, historical and cultural context. So these are very interesting, phenomena, and it's an exciting place to be in, actually, and we need to preserve these languages. There are no two ways about it. And the reason I'm mentioning it all is because it tells you why linguistics is important, why linguistics need to be taught, not just at the PG level, but also in the UG level, why we need to take an interest in the subject, why there is more research that need to be done, and why we need to be trained in linguistics even more. Okay. Okay, teaching linguistics to literature students. I'm sorry, I kind of went on a long kind of introduction, a long background. I had to give a long background to the topic, but it's very related. So now I've come to the main topic, which is what are the challenges of teaching linguistics. So with this background in mind, let's explore, let's see the kind of challenges that somebody from linguistics, a teacher from linguistics, faces in a literature class when trying to teach linguistics. And this is again based on my own experience. Okay, I already mentioned I taught linguistics in a private university at both UG and PG levels in the Department of English Literature, and prior to that, I taught linguistics in a linguistics department in a central university in Shillong, where I also, completed my PhD from. So those two experiences were, hugely different. I faced, because when I went to teach linguistics in USTM, the university, the private university where I taught it in a literature department, I went with. I went with an understanding that students might find it, new or even a little difficult. But I was not ready when I walked to the classroom. I was really not ready to see the kinds of challenges that I faced. I did not expect, I did not anticipate that there will be a lot of challenges in my way. And initially, I thought maybe I was not a good teacher and something I was missing. And I was trying, so I tried to interact with my students a lot. I tried to figure out why there was a kind of lack of interest in my classes, why what was it that that made the students kind of uninterested in the subject. I could sense that, right? So I talked to them, and the reason I felt that was because I also taught other courses in the department, which are more related to literature, like forms of literature, or communicative English even. And in those classes, I had a very good response. The feedback was really good. But when it came to the linguistics class, the response was quite lukewarm. So it made me wonder what went wrong with linguistics. And I tried to open them up. I tried to interact with them in person and in the classroom, and then I came to understand, and they openly told me that these are the reasons they don't like linguistics. They think linguistics is very hard to understand, it is too technical, and it is unrelated to literature. So why should they care, right? Basically, it all boils down to, why should we care? And unfortunately, if we don't understand that there is a challenge as such, that the students from literature might have a question as such in their mind, will not be able to tackle this challenge. So this was the challenge. So if I look at the challenge, I would summarize it in two ways. The first is the attitude, right? So these were the certain kind of attitudes that I faced when I tried to teach linguistics in a literature class. So they responded that it was hard to understand, and they found it technical, too technical, and it was unrelated. Okay, now, so I tried to dig deeper into the reasons why they thought so. They found it technical, hard to understand, and unrelated. And then these are some of the reasons I came up with, and I also saw these were also the results of that kind of attitude. So there are a lot of myths around linguistics. So what are the myths? I already started when I in the very beginning of my talk, I already mentioned that when you say you are a student of linguistics, the first question people would ask you, is how many languages you can speak, right? There is a difference between language learning and linguistics, and I have already explained enough what linguistics is, so I hope you understand by now. So language learning is not dependent on whether you know or do not know linguistics. It's not a prerequisite, but yeah. So someone may have a higher aptitude for learning language, and but they may not make a good linguist, right? So linguistics is all about how you get trained into studying languages, uh, but learning to speak language is a very different process altogether. So that myth is there. So they question. So when I taught them these general principles or ideas about linguistics, that kind of questions came to in their mind. Why should we care? Because they're studying English literature, and why should anything beyond the scope of English should factor in their curriculum? They kind of question that. That kind of curiosity came. Why should they know about other languages, and why should they care? So the myths around linguistics, that's one of the main reasons. And when I say myth, it's not only about that it's learning many languages. It's also this idea that it's very technical. There is an attitude, and that actually has to do with our education policy, I would say. Like I said, linguistics is a new subject, right? So new in the sense that it's not available in the UG level in almost all the universities, with the exception of just a few. It is not available in the UG level. So students who learn, English literature. So I was also a student. I could relate to that experience. I did not know what linguistics is all about when I was a student of English literature in the UG level. I knew a little bit of phonetics. That was all. So it is largely neglected, and it is not my own experience alone. I have spoken to a lot of students. I have my colleagues in the English department there. They have also reported the same. There is not a lot of importance given to the subject, and so there is this attitude which is. Because the students then go on to become teachers, right? And so that kind of attitude continues. So there is a negative attitude that linguistics is very technical and hard to understand. So that kind of those kind of myths are there. When it is not that difficult to understand, once you understand the way to do it, or actually it's all about the motivation, because the motivation is lacking. They tend to be uninterested, and as a result, they perform even they do not perform well, and then they take it to be a difficult subject. So that was my understanding of the situation. And with many batches. And so with that understood, once I tried to understand, I tried to kind of analyze the reasons why they have this attitude, and then I tried to address those issues. And I was successful to quite an extent with the batches that first, the two batches, one PG, one UG, classes that I first taught, but not to that extent. But from the next batch, I became more aware of what needs to be done, and then the situation completely changed. The students not only took an interest in linguistics, but they even approached me to me and other colleagues in my department to ask if linguistics, if if new papers on linguistics, new courses on linguistics can be added in the curriculum as optional papers in the fourth semester or in the third semester. So there was there was a lot of progress made, and it was possible only because this we took this interaction, we had this interaction, and I tried to understand the root cause of the problem. So yeah, so myths around linguistics was the main reason. And then so there is a fear of it being a different subject. So different in the sense that okay, I'll come to that why it's different, but they perceive it as different, right? It's very different from literature is what they how they used to express. And then ignorance about the interconnectedness. So they do not know how language and literature, linguistics and literature are connected, how English literature, to be more specific, and English linguistics are connected. They do not have an idea, and I don't blame them, because there is not much of awareness in our academia about that. When I was a UG student, even I was kind of clueless. So so the interconnectedness is something that the students do not know, and it's actually the teacher's responsibility to convey that. I quickly learned that, even though when I first went to teach linguistics, I of course gave a background about what linguistics is, but then I did not realize that I have to really emphasize and highlight the reason they should care, the reason it is so urgent and so important to study. I did not know to what extent I need to emphasize that, because previously when I taught in a linguistics department, it was kind of understood that linguistics is so and so. So yeah, so that was a difference that a difference and a challenge that I faced when I started teaching linguistics in a literature department first. And then in the earlier days. And then so all of that, when there is a fear, when there is a misunderstanding, there is an inevitable indifference, right? They are not interested. They would just sit in the class without taking much interest. Even the even the first benches, they, or the toppers, even they were attending the classes, but the level of interest you was not comparable with other classes. So there was a evident lack of indifference. They were not very curious, so you could understand, even though, because if a teacher can explain, but if there is a lack of curiosity from the students part, then the teacher can only explain so much. So the root cause needs to be addressed, is what I'm trying to get at. So there was, so the basic the challenge, or the main reason is that there is a lack of motivation, right? So the students do not have a motivation to study the subject. They do not know how it is connected. They do not know why it is not so different, why it is not so difficult, or why it is important. First of all, why should they care? That is the question that is not properly addressed in our education system. So so there is not enough motivation, because motivation is not just extrinsic, it is also intrinsic, right? Because extrinsic motivation would be awarding marks and complimenting when they do well. So they work only to a certain extent, but intrinsic motivation is also important. When the student understands or realizes the importance of a subject, that is more I would say healthy in the long term, or that is more useful in the long term. um, So yeah, so there was a lack of motivation, and I could I understood that there was a lack of motivation, and there was a lack of communication. So yeah, so the communication between teacher and student, the communication between even in the department, even among the colleagues, I think it is important to have that kind of communication, about our courses that we teach. If Because a lot of my colleagues when I first joined were also not very much aware of why linguistics is important. So but once we communicated more, they were also very interested, and as a result, they would also go and encourage students. If something related comes up in their classes, they would also encourage the students to take an interest in linguistics. So that kind of communication also helps. So yeah, so there is a lot that there is a lot of challenge that I faced, and I'm sharing them because anyone who want to go teach linguistics in a literature class, at least in India, these are something they can keep in mind. So yeah, so these are challenges, but there are also ways that we can surely handle the challenges. Okay, so yeah, so attitude is the first challenge. The second challenge is the difference. Now, what is difference? So this is also a perceived difference, I would say. So there is this understanding that linguistics is objective, and literature is subjective. Linguistics involves critical thinking, and literature involves imagination. Linguistics is all about language, and literature is all about again imaginative, creative pursuits. It doesn't have to do with language much, and then there is a lack of connection between these two. So this kind of perception of difference exists. I'll explain what this mean one by one. So what is subjective and objective? So when we say subjectivity, we talk about how a person experiences things in their mind, how their feelings or opinions, they make a judgment about something based on their feelings and opinions rather than facts. And there are many interpretations available. So literature is subjective in that sense, because, for example, if you read a poem, there is no hard and fast rule that you'll have to understand the poem the way the poet intended the poem to mean, right? In most cases, we do not even know what the poet wanted to express or not express, but we have our own interpretation. Literature gives us that freedom. Of course, there are different theories, and structuralism would say that there is a structure, and this kind of speakers, the poets, the authors, intentions are not so much part of it, but mostly this is the view that literature is subjective. It is open to interpretation. Not just poetry, the open-ended fictions, for example, the stories, the novels, all of that. So yeah, literature is subjective mostly. Because it's more about feelings than and more about opinions and feelings than facts. So, linguistics, on the other hand, because it's scientific, the approach to study languages is mostly scientific. So, it is objective in approach, more based on facts. I already mentioned, especially with language documentation, we are very objective. We base our findings on the empirical data. Of course, there is also a rational approach in linguistics. There are certain universals that are propagated, and based on those universals, some findings are made. There is a group of scholars who believe in the generative group of linguists. They believe in that, but especially when it comes to functionalism, and then language documentation. This is what it is all about. Empirical data is important. We go collect data, and we try to eliminate the biases, and then we test it, and we go as objective as possible. Of course, I think this is also a reason, I would say justified reason why someone, a student of linguistics, might find it difficult, because it is difficult but not impossible. Um, that It is very difficult to be kind of objective about language, because language is something that we do all the time, right? Now that I'm speaking to you, I'm using language. You're listening to me, and that is also true language, right? So our understanding, our communication, our expression, everything is happening in language. So um, because language is something that we do all the time, we take it for granted. So we do not analyze. Now I have already given you an understanding of how linguists analyze words, sentences, sounds, everything, speech sounds, context, everything. But when we speak our own mother tongues, when we speak our native language, we do not do those calculations in mind. Even as a linguist, when I'm speaking my own mother tongue, when I speak, I do not think so much. I have acquired the language, and I just exercise my competence in terms of knowing the language. So there is a dichotomy between competence and performance. So I make mistakes, I take pauses. Even when I'm speaking, I have taken pauses. You have noticed. This is what makes language natural. If I speak like this, it will sound very robotic, right? So yeah, so languages, natural languages are such. Now, to look at it objectively, to look at it, to analyze everything, it kind of gets difficult. But with training, with studying languages, with describing languages, we do achieve that skill, where we are able to look at it from a more objective point of view, right? So this is I like this quotation from John Lyons, that anyone who wants to study linguistics need to develop an objective approach. Okay, so this is why there is a difference. There is no denying the difference, that subjective and objective. So yeah, there is a difference, but probably not to the extent that it is thought to be, because, like I said, there is a place of objectivity even in literature. When you analyze a poem, for example, I talked about stylistic analysis, right? I talked about stylistics as analyzing styles, analyzing different tools of language. There you are also, when you are looking at the structure, basically, when you're analyzing the structure of the language, or you're making a theoretical discussion on something. For example, if you're looking at the historical background, or context in which the story took place, you are looking at the history, then you are also objective. You're being objective. So there is place of objectivity even in literature. It is not completely subjective, but of course linguistics is more subjective. So it is not as different. There is a difference, but not not polar. They are not polar opposites. Okay, then there is a second difference, set of difference, that is imagination versus critical thinking. I have put the word myth in the bracket, because again, this is something I do not agree with. This is a perceived difference, imagination versus critical thinking. Literature do talk about imagination, but any student of literature who have taken a master student of literature, for example, who have studied the subject for a good amount of time, a considerable amount of time, would tell you that it does involve a lot of critical thinking. It is not a leisure kind of reading, that we do if we are not studying it. When it's there is a difference between reading something for leisure, just for fun, just for pleasure, versus reading something to understand or analyze. So as a student of literature, you are also on your toes to kind of interpret the text. So yeah, so that is also something new. You have to use your critical thinking. You have to look at it from a critical point of view, more objective, more from a more distance, taking into account the socio the socio-cultural factors. In fact, as a student of literature, I think I studied history, and not just me, all of us, who have studied literature have studied a lot of history, psychology, philosophy, all of that, because everything is connected to literature. Literature is by definition a body of written works. So how would you not how would you avoid those? So there is a lot of there is a lot of interdisciplinary study that goes into it. You have to know a lot of background to the creation, to the literary work. And then there are different theories that one needs to know, and then how that is implemented in a text. So literature is also a lot about critical thinking. So to just to kind of say that literature is all about imagination and doesn't have to do with real issues, or doesn't involve thinking, is a very that is a simplification. So yeah, but this is a layman's kind of notion that exists. Students, in at least in the beginning of the courses, that is something they kind of feel that literature is supposed to be fun. And often students also get surprised when that is not the case. When apparently cute poem like the daffodils end up giving you information about more serious issues in a society, then that comes as a surprise. But anyway, my point is, there is a role of critical thinking. In fact, there is a huge role of critical thinking in literature. And so we cannot actually say that literature is only about imagination. Yeah, because subjectivity is not subjectivity doesn't mean a lack of critical thinking. One can be subjective, as in one can interpret it based on one's opinion, but how you form the opinion doesn't have to come from imagination, but can come from facts. Well informed thoughts, or well informed ideas. So yeah. Okay. So then there is this dichotomy between language versus literature, as if these are two very different entities. That is the general notion that exists, that language and literature are very different. But we often forget that without language, literature cannot exist. And without literature, language is also kind of insipid. Without creative manifestations, language is only would only be reduced to just communicating the important needs. But we also need a place where we can express our ideas and experiences with the world. So these are very connected things. There is hardly a boundary, but this is what commonly people perceive this boundary to happen, to exist. So yeah, so language, now of course there are some differences. Language is a human communication system with distinct properties, mainly uses written communication, but they're interconnected. I think this does not need much explanation. Let's move on to lack of connection. So uh, I already mentioned that students feel that there is no connection between linguistics and literature. One topic is about they feel that linguistics is all about some obscure symbols and formulas and rules, something like maths, and literature is all about all roses and sunshine, which is not the case. It also involves critical thinking, but that is the kind of idea that exists in the beginning of a student's career, at least. And then one very important point is students also feel that there is no scope for further research, because that is something I have experienced firsthand. A lot of my students who were very academically inclined, and who shared with me that they wanted to go for further they do want to go for higher studies after their masters, they want to go for research. They shared with me what is the scope of research. We studied linguistics, we learned about some symbols, but how is it going to help us in research? I would have to, why should I invest my time in a subject which doesn't even have a scope for research, which is such an ironical, thinking to have, right? When you know what linguistics can offer, and not just can offer, what linguistics, need, so urgently from us to research on, this is such an understatement. This is such a misunderstanding. But again, we cannot blame the students for having this kind of ideas, or these ideas about these differences, or having some myths about the gap between these two different disciplines, because it is, as a teacher, it's our job to communicate the gap, to bridge the gap. Okay, so here I come to the solutions. In fact, I have already, when I talked about the challenges, I also talked in a way about the solutions, but let me go to more concrete solutions. So, with this kind of understanding, I try to understand how I can help them overcome, this kind of fears, overcome this kind of attitudes, make them more interested in the subject. And I started it with the very first batch, and towards the end of the, and like right before their exams, I think. One month in that semesters, I think 1 or 2 months before their final exam, I saw a good change. I saw a positive change. They came to me, to talk kind of know more about a lot of things that I taught in the class. The indifference, the indifferent attitude changed a lot. They were a lot more curious to know more about some of the things I taught, or what are the different ways that can be done. Some of them even asked me about the career options in linguistics, so they showed a lot of interest. So yeah, the based on that kind of experience, I would suggest that it's mostly about changing the attitude. If we can change the attitude, we can tackle the issue. And to do that, how to change the attitude, we have to first and foremost uh, go with a very open mind. When we, as teachers, when we go to the class, we have to go with a very open mind. We have to we have to understand that the students do not have a clue about what linguistics is and why it is important. So we have to explain them. It's on us. It's our responsibility to explain to them why we need to care about languages, why we need to care about one, they need to care about linguistics. So yeah, and a lot of patience and a lot of encouragement is needed. And then we have to communicate the connection. This is something that we should do in the very beginning of the course. We have to, because you know they have so many papers, they have so many courses to study. And if we do not clearly tell them how the paper in linguistics is related to these other papers, they will not show any interest. And what is the connection? For example, okay, I'll talk about that more. So yeah, so dissemination, simplifying these complex ideas, that is also one way to go about it. After you explain the kind of the connection, you also need to explain the linguistic terms in as simple terms as possible, in as simple language as possible. So that is also something we can do. We need to create awareness. So when I say awareness, I talk about the awareness of language endangerment. I also talk about the awareness of multilingualism, because more often than not, our classrooms are multilingual spaces. And if we can, if we can make them aware to the fact that we live in such a diverse classroom. I mean, we are united in such a diverse classroom, and it is a good thing. And what that means, it is also something they would automatically be interested in, taking an interest in the languages. So I would give an example again from my own experience. So some I did to create awareness. something that I did was I involved the whole class in a project. On the 21st February, as we know, Mother Language Day is celebrated. You know, in the world, across the world, and so there, before, to mark that occasion, I talked to the students and I involved them in a project where we came up with a list of greetings which are used in our department by various students, and we came up with 24 ways to say hello. For example, how are you? 24 mother tongues, which was like amazing, and the students were really excited, and they were very enthusiastic when they saw that there are so many different language speakers that exist in the same department. Some of their friends speak all these beautiful languages, all these new languages that did not even bother to ask before, right? They did not, I mean, they knew maybe the name of the language, but they did not care much. So with that kind of awareness also comes an interest in each other's languages, each other's cultures. So it also creates a very healthy classroom space, and it definitely, after that, I have seen that there was definitely a more interest in, the mother tongues, especially with the minority language speakers. They came to me, and some of them said that they felt a sense of pride to see their, to see an expression of their language being displayed, in the event, and they felt very happy to see that, and they were also interested to, going forward, they were interested to describe their own languages, which are most of which are low resourced languages, and with the majority language speakers, they were also interested, they were interested to learn these other languages. So that kind of exercises can also be useful to make students, to give a practical sense, basically, that linguistics is not something technical and obscure and distant, but it is something which is practically applicable, and which is something that needs to be studied and can be studied and is fun to describe and know about. So languages are fun to describe and know about, and so that is something one can do. There are other ways to create awareness. I just shared my experience here. Then one can build confidence. So these kind of steps are also helpful to build confidence, and to build confidence, one needs to talk about this, to acknowledging the linguistic diversity that exists in a classroom can go a long way, actually, to build confidence in the speakers. The new generation, I mean, the young generation's speakers, the students. It's a good place to start with. And yeah and not just the interest in or confidence in speaking their own language, but also confidence in learning linguistics, and only the teacher can do that. The teacher can build sense of confidence that it is possible to learn linguistics. It is not that hard. So dissemination again helps. Patience and motivation is a must. Motivation I have already talked about. Patience, the teacher has to go with the mind that it's not going to be easy. There has to be a lot of explanation. Students will may not be interested in the beginning, but they will have to be patient with them, and it is not the student's fault. That is, a student centric approach is basically what is needed. um, then group work, that is something also I found very useful, because when something is considered as different or difficult, group work can release that pressure a lot. When the students worked as a group, so I divided them into various groups in the classroom. Most of my classes were the exercises were group exercises. I also included peer teaching, and so in the group works, they were more enthusiastic and more yeah, more collaborative, and they presented their work, and yeah, so group work definitely helped in breaking the ice. And some fun activities can also be made part of the study, especially with communicative English or that kind of subjects. There are a lot of language games available. Some of them you can search online. There's a lot of games available that can be made. Personally, I found it, I mean, one can be creative with it. I When I taught phonetics, I asked everyone to write their own names in in the IPA script. IPA is like the phonetic script. That is instead of okay, so I did not explain that much, but in phonetics we do not write the letters. We represent the sounds, because letter and sound are not always the same thing. For example, in English, CAUGHT, the middle part of it is not pronounced as cocked, but is pronounced as caught, right? HYMN, him, the last N is silent. So you can see that the letter and sound do not always match. So in phonetics, what we do is we have a set of symbols which are scientifically devised by the International Phonetic Association. So there is an alphabet where each sound has a letter as a symbol assigned to them. We call them IPA symbols. So students, so we teach those symbols in phonetics, and so that alphabet has those codes for, I mean, the symbols for every language that is worked on, at least in the world. And so with those, if we learn that if we learn that alphabet, if we learn the IPA symbols, we can what we say transcribe. That is, we can write any sound in the language. We do not have to know the language. For example, if a language speaker from, let's say, Zulu, a Zulu speaker from Africa, speaks their language to me right now, and if I have to produce the speech, if I have to represent what they spoke, I may not know the meaning, but I would be able to, from listening to what they said, I can correctly kind of write it in using that code. But again, these things need a lot of training. That is also something which is why linguistics is important, even for English literature or any other literature subject, because it helps in learning a language also in a way, because you have your listening skills get more developed. There is a lot of training that happens, how we perceive a sound, how we correctly, because the teacher is there to guide if the transcription is wrong. So anyway, as part of something fun, I also I asked them to write their names in IP's symbols, and they found that very interesting. And then they were also interested to write more words, and so that kind of things also help. The idea is to keep it interesting and kind of empathetic. Understand that students are going to find it difficult, but try to talk to them, try to interact and understand where they face difficulty and how to tackle it. With communication, I think it's quite possible. So again, communicating further implications. So as I've already explained, there is so much scope of research in linguistics. So if we explain those avenues, students are definitely going to be interested in learning linguistics. And then okay, so how do we communicate the connection? So this is how we can do that. Structuralism and stylistics I've already explained. So we can talk about stylistics as to how they're similar, and how stylistics is part of both language and literature. How linguistics, knowledge of linguistics can help them with stylistic analysis, literary analysis. How structuralism, structuralism is again a theory which came to forefront with which were mostly highlighted by Saussure, Ferdinand de Saussure's book called A Course on General Linguistics, and in the early 20th century. So, which was a compilation of his lectures in the University of Geneva. And there he talked about basically um, the idea that he talked about language as in language in terms of binary, a lot of binary concepts. What is a language versus what is the language? What is synchronic versus diachronic? For example, I have already explained to you what historical linguistics is, right? Saussure brought the focus into studying not from language change. He was not opposed to language change, of course. He acknowledged language change. He himself has worked on with language change, with historical linguistics, but he brought the focus on studying the languages in the present time. So he used the word synchronic study for that. Historical study, he used the term diachronic, and for language as it is in one point of time. It doesn't have to be present. It can be at any point, but at one point of time, as opposed to the change between 2 points. When we study a language or more languages at one particular point in time, that is called a synchronic study. So Saussure brought the focus back into that, and as a result, also to spoken languages. Speech became more primary. He brought the focus back to spoken language and to structure. So as a result, and he also connected linguistics with semiotics, which is a study of signs. So when I say sign, I mean something that stands for another thing, right? So a traffic light can be a sign. The yellow light, the red light is a stop sign, right? A yellow light asks you to pause. The green light asks us to go. So that kind of, those are also kind of symbols. So in the world of communication is based on the signs, and there are two kinds of signs that he talked about, and with the help of that, I don't know how much time I have, so I'm kind of trying to wrap it up. But with two kinds of signs, he basically showed that language can be understood with in terms of oppositions. That is, black is not white. What is black? We can define it as not white. Language can be described in terms of relatedness, combinations. For example, when I say I'm a woman, three words are combined in a string: I, am, and woman. If I change the order of these words, the meaning will change, right? Am I a woman? Right? The meaning changes. So he talked about that, and yeah. So he brought the idea that language is not language has basically two aspects to it. One is the speech utterance, and the other is the idea that it's a form or as a system. So he talked about these two aspects of language. So language as a form or system, and language as a particular utterance, speech. So as a system or as a structure, we can look at language independent of what is happening in a particular language, and we can study that, and that idea became very influential in literature. A lot of critics, literary critics, like Rolla Barthes, took interest in that, and then from there, of course, post-structuralism emerged. But structuralism helped to analyze literary text, without, like I have indicated earlier, I think, a text can be dissected in terms of its structure, as in terms of the combinations of the linguistic elements, the words and sentences, which is called syntagmatic structure, and the paradigmatic structure, which is how you can, in terms of oppositions, black is not white, right? So if there is a sentence, I have a cat, you can replace the word cat with dog. So that gives you an idea what can occupy in that, what word can, occupy that slot. So that kind of ideas. And so with that, a certain way of, looking at or critiquing, studying literature emerged. So structuralism is a very dominant idea, was a very dominant idea in literature. And these are some ways we can show the students that see, these are not two different boxes. Linguistics and literature are very connected, because if one needs to know what structuralism is, one needs to understand what linguistics what is. One needs to know why what speech is, what the symbols, phonetic symbols are, and all kinds of things. So statistics again, that way. Um, yeah, so and finally, when we talk about connection, in the broader picture, of course, literature and linguistics both are mirrors to society, right? That is why literature, that is why we are so interested in literature. We want to know, we want to know what is going on with the society, basically, in the present times, or what happened in the past. So we can literature shows, because people are expressing their feelings and emotions and opinions creatively or directly, in literal or figurative language in literature, right? Every time, humans are creative, beings, and we language, again, interestingly, language, one of the fundamental properties of language is creativity. So language allows us to be creative. It allows us to talk about things which are not present in the moment. I do not have to travel to Europe to talk about Europe. I do not have to yeah, so there are a lot of properties, there's a lot of productivity that language allows, just with a few set of phonemes, which are the sound units, speech sound units. I can make so many, I as in we, as speakers, in any language, we can make so many words and sentences. So language is an amazing thing. It allows us to be creative, and literature is a creative outlet. So and linguistics, I have already explained, like how all the cultural expressions and everything, in fact, our whole lifestyle, our worldview is expressed in language, through language. So so studying that is definitely is seeing a mirror view. Looking is definitely like looking at the mirror to the society. So they are very much connected. Now, what about the research scope? So, oral literature is something which needs to be emphasized. I talked so much about, you know, um, language documentation and revitalization, and I think, one way we can do that as students of literature, and should do as a student of literature, and academics in literature departments, is that we should take a keen interest in oral literature. Of course, it is being done, but more needs to be done. It would be wonderful if the oral literature of so many indigenous languages, language communities are documented. They are studied, or they are even translated. That would be a wonderful thing, and literature departments can take a very strong initiative in that direction. So, yeah, that is something which can also be a scope of research for literature students. Again, policy is important. Like I said, if the policy of a government in terms of whether a language is promoted or demoted can affect the way the language grows or decays in the society. So similarly, in the academics also, if linguistics has to thrive, it has to thrive in the policy level itself. More teachers, more teachers who are trained in linguistics need to be hired in the English departments, or in other literature departments, because like I said, for example, in phonetics, you need to be really trained to kind of correctly judge whether the students are learning it right. So somebody who is trained in linguistics is definitely useful, and of course that is a kind of like an urgent step. And once the students are, the literature students are also trained well in linguistics, they can become faculty members in the coming days. But as of now, I think this is something which can be done and needs to be done. And more than that, in the curriculum, that is the most important thing, we need to include courses like social linguistics, because what is happening in the society, and a lot of when there are language debates, for example, when there are so many, especially in India, political the political boundaries are also based on linguistic languages. So when there is a language movement that happens, or language protest based on language, protest for different states happen based on a language, or some group of people protest against imposition of a certain language. So when that kind of debates happen over language, um, the common people do not really know, do not have an informed opinion, basically, on these issues. It is always the mass kind of mentality, and people get swayed by emotions, and that often causes a lot of unnecessary kind of trouble, and a lot of chaos in the politically and culturally. There is a lot of chaos that can be avoided, actually, with the knowledge of linguistics, with the knowledge of what is a language, and what is how all languages are equal. That kind of basic ideas, that would really help. And social linguistics is a subject that is a must. A lot of universities still do not include that kind of subject. So social linguistics, stylistics, of course, it exists in some forms, but not social linguistics. I would say social linguistics is a must. It's a compulsory subject course that needs to be adopted. Maybe folk studies, so that oral literature is given more importance. Translation studies, that kind of subjects are also very important to be kind of included in the curriculum. So yeah, so so far I have talked about the challenges and how we can tackle them. But before I end, I would like to, kind of review whether it was any worth. Why should we even focus on this? Is there any benefits? Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong slide. Okay, so I'll talk about that in the end. For now, there are other benefits also of learning language, learning linguistics, language proficiency. Daniel Jones, the famous phonetician, he's the one who pointed out how, a trained ear is a must for phonetics, and that happens with years of linguistics research. Even me as a student in the beginning of my masters of linguistics, I was not very confident about whether I transcribed, that is, wrote the symbols, represented the sounds of a different language properly or not. That has come only with years of experience, years of practice. If we have to teach students, we need to be trained ourselves. And if we want to be researchers, able to contribute to language documentation and preservation, also that is a must. And apart from that, that kind of listening skills, or perception of sounds, speech sounds, will help us to be more proficient in language. And not just in terms of sounds, a better understanding of the structure of language in all its levels: morphology, syntax, phonetics, semantics, pragmatics, discourse. It will definitely help us to become language more proficient in language. Again, from my experience with communicative English, I because I'm from the linguistics background, I made it a point to not just tell them these are the, this is what it is, but I also started with, for example, I did not just tell them what assonance is and consonance is or alliteration is, but I told them how we actually make sounds. And I started from the more basic level. So that kind of knowledge definitely helps. So the scope of research, that is, again, already discussed. Stylistics, better understanding of it. A lot of students also found stylistics difficult, but with exposure to linguistics, that became easier for them. That is also, again, my experience. Enhanced critical thinking. Of course, literature also prepares a student to be more critically thinking. But with linguistics, that can also be improved. And social awareness is something that that is so relevant. If we do not know our languages, if we do not know our languages, we do not know the kind of community, and then the what is happening. So yeah, and then the literary theories would be more enriched if we know them, if we know the oral literature, and then if we translate them. So yeah, in conclusion, I would say that there it is an important challenge. There are a lot of challenges that happen, happen when you go teach the subject in a literature classroom, but then they are possible to solve. And it's high time that language and literature join hands to contribute to society, to grow a more safer space for indigenous languages. Yeah, that's all. Sorry for taking long, but the scope was quite wide. So thank you for your patience. I end my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks for sharing your your informative presentation with our participants. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
ma'am. Ma'am, we'll start our Q&A session within a minute. So I'll play the video, and after that video, we'll come back with our participants.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
My dear lovely participants, thank you for stay with us till our program. And once again, we invite our speaker in our Q&A session. So please ask your question in our comment box based on our today's topic, and please mention our speaker's name in the comment box. So we are just waiting for your question. Okay, we have our first question from Chandrasekhar Rao. He said, how about semantics and syntax in literature?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes, they are also very important. So I'm assuming that you want to know what is the role of semantics and syntax in literature. Am I understanding it right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so yes, that is also important because semantics, like I said, is associated with all the levels, whether it's phonetics, whether it's speech sound, whether it's the morphology, whether it's this even syntax. Meaning cannot be stripped out of any of this. So semantics is the glue that connects everything. Meaning is the glue that connects everything. So even in the literary analysis, in the when So okay, I'll give you a practical example so that you can understand it better. So when we study literary devices, stylistic analysis in English literature, for example, we talk about metaphors and metonymy, right? We talk about comparisons. Now that is something which is part of meaning. It is based on meaning that we are comparing two dissimilar objects. For example, when you say okay, I'm not able to remember a line from a poem at the moment, but there are enough examples. Okay, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. This famous poem by William Blake. So tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. So burning bright, for a tiger cannot burn bright, right? It's a comparison. A tiger is compared with fire, burning like a fire. The comparison is not stated directly, but it is intended. So that is an example of a metaphor. Now this comparison is based on meaning, right? So, and meaning is studied in semantics. So you can understand there are different meaning networks. Semantic networks is what we say. So if you understand them, you will know. Again, metonymy, same thing. I already explained, I think. In terms of syntax, again, when I talked about structuralism, how you can see oppositions, as in good is not bad, white is not black, that kind of, how you can replace words, how you can replace phrases, or how you can combine words and phrases. So those are also part of our literary analysis, and that is something that syntax deals with. So to answer your question, yes, there is a important role of syntax and semantics in literary studies, literary analysis. Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Okay, we have our next question from Valdez Diana. She said, "Thank you for your insights, Dr. Bharadwaj. What approaches can we teachers use in teaching linguistics in a virtual literature class?"
Thank you for the question. That's a very relevant question. With COVID, everything is moved to online, or at least we are making use of the blended learning modes, right? So it is also a bad and a good time to live in. Yes. With virtual literature class, I think it's even more. It's easier to kind of use this knowledge from different disciplines, including linguistics. So again, I would talk about my own experience, because I did take classes, during this time, to my literature students, and I used we used through the classes were in the video mode. So if I had to teach anything, that there were some restrictions, of course, like it was not possible to go to the field during this time. So but teaching linguistics was still possible, teaching phonetics was still possible. They could hear me given the internet, of course. Again, it all comes back to infrastructure. We need to build a good infrastructure, because if we do not have internet, it is impossible to impart knowledge during this pandemic times. So yes, if there is a good network connection, it's possible. And I also made use of notes. Like I made a lot of audio recordings for them to understand it better, because linguistics cannot be taught in just a textual mode. It has to be taught in a video audio kind of mode. So I made a lot of audio recordings and shared them in a drive with students. There was chat box to, yeah, basically made use of technology. Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with our participants, because I think we all get benefited from your presentation.
Thank you. Nice to know
Thank
that.
you. Thank you so much, ma'am. And once again, from all of us, and we are thank you, and we are very honored to have you. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for giving the opportunity to connect with so many people. And I'm really thankful to the audience as well, for taking the time out, and showing the curiosity in learning these languages, about the showing interest on the topic of revitalization, because like I said, it's an urgent there is an urgent need to work on this field. And so yeah, I'm happy to hear from you all. And in my slide, you must have seen I have left my email address. So if you have more queries, I can see some questions in the chat box, so you can contact me. I'd be happy to share whatever insights I can, or resources I can. Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, thank you so much,
Thank you
everyone.
so much, ma'am. Thank you. My dear lovely participants, we'll start our quiz competition with in a second. So get ready for it because there's so many excitements in our quiz session. Once again, welcome everyone in our quiz competition session. You can see the quiz link in our comment box that we given. So please join with us in our quiz competition, and you can also see the code flashed on our screen, and the code is quiz IGP. So first, very first to join with us. I can see we already have 11 participants in this session and we need more. Okay, let me remind all of you that to share this quiz competition with your friends, with your familiar person, and mention them in our comment box. You can also tag them. And there is a surprising announcement for all of you that from today we are announcing for top uh, 20 top winners in our competition. So we need more competitor, need more participants in this session. You can see the joining link in our comment box, or the code you're watching in our flash, in our screen that flashed, and the code is quiz IGP. Or you can click, you can uh, scan the code showing, QR code showing on screen. Okay, we already have 21 participants. Within a minute, we'll start our quiz competition session. So please join first. Don't forget to share, comment, mention, and tag your friends. My dear lovely participants, you can see the joining link in our comment box. And the quiz code flashed on our screen. The code is quiz IGP. Or you can go to the link www.slido.com. Okay, we are going to start our show here. Our first question. Sculpt writes about different ways of teaching writing in school. Which of these are mentioned? Process oriented writing or direct method? And the correct answer is process oriented writing. 88% choose the correct answer. Let's see leaderboard. Okay, we have Jameline V. Rivera on first position in our leaderboard. Let's see our next question. Western civilization has its roots in ancient Greece or ancient Rome. The correct answer is ancient Greece. 83% chose the right answer. Let's see our leaderboard. Okay, now we have Liesel on first position in our leaderboard. Congratulations. Let's go for our third question. In balance of power system, no single state is allowed to become dominant over another, or each state is approximately equal in size. So the correct answer is no single state is allowed to become dominant over another. 75% gave the right answer. We have Eugene D. Gabriel on first position in our leaderboard. Let's go for a fourth question. The most important school of Northern Arts was in Flanders or Netherlands. And the correct answer is Flanders. 44% gave the right answer. Let's go to our leaderboard. We have Geraldine on first position in our leaderboard. Congratulations. Let's see our next question. The development of mobile type and printing resulted in rapid spread of new ideas or invention of paper. And the correct answer is rapid spread of new ideas. 62% choose the right answer. Let's see your leaderboard. Okay, we have Charlene Calizo on first position in our leaderboard. Congratulations. Let's go for our sixth question. The Reconquista contributed to the rise of a new monarchy in Spain or France. Choose your correct right answer. And the correct answer is Spain. 81% gave the right answer. Let's go to our leaderboard. We have Eugene D. Gabriel on first position in our leaderboard. Congratulations. Let's see our next question. In France, a tax that could be imposed by the king was called the taille or tribute. I repeat once again the question. In France, a tax that could be imposed by the king was called the taille or tribute. And the correct answer is tailed. 56% gave the right answer. That's your leaderboard. Okay, we have once again Evin D. Gabriel on first position in our leaderboard. Let's go for our eighth question. The Italian cities were able to play a crucial role in politics because of their economic wealth and power or agricultural output. Choose your answer. The correct answer is economic wealth and power. 96% gave the right answer. Okay, let's see our leaderboard. Once again, we have Iguin de Gabriel on first position in our leaderboard. Congratulations, Iguin. Let's see our next question. Beginning in the middle of the 15th century, Florence was dominated by the Medici or Popes. And the correct answer is first one. It is C. 85% choose the correct answer. Let's go to our leaderboard. Iguindi Gabriel on first position in our leaderboard one more time. Congratulations. Let's see our next question. In order to create depth in a painting, blank was used shadow or perspective. Fill the blank with your answer. Is this shadow or perspective? The correct answer is shadow. 70% given the right answer. Let's see your leaderboard. Okay, we have Iguindi Gabriel MSc. Congratulations. He's on first position in our leaderboard. Let's see our 11th question. The Wars of the Roses contributed to the rise of a new monarchy in England or Spain. I repeat the question again. The Wars of the Roses contributed to the rise of a new monarchy in England or Spain. The correct answer is England. It is 74% choose the right answer. Let's see your leaderboard. Okay, we have Abdullahi Abdul Fatahi. Congratulations, he's on first position in our leaderboard. He took 3 minutes 13 seconds. Okay, for this question. Okay, let's go for our next question. What are the core elements in the English subject curriculum? Communication, grammar, and literature, or communication, language learning, and encounters with English text. The question is, what are the core elements in the English subject curriculum? Let's see our answer. The correct answer is communication, language learning, and encounters with English text. Only 8% give the right answer. Let's see a leaderboard. Okay, we once again we have Abdullahi on first position in our leaderboard. Let's see our question number 13. The point of view is used in the crossover. Is this first person or third person limited? I repeat once again the question. What point of view is used in the crossover? And the correct answer is first person. 68% of majority chose the right answer. That's your leaderboard. Once again, we have Abdullahi on first position in our leaderboard. Let's go for our question number 14. In the Middle Ages, the area more urban than the rest of the Europe was Spain or Italy. In the middle of in the Middle Ages, the area more urban than the rest of Europe was Spain or Italy. So the correct answer is Italy. 44% choose the correct answer. Let's see a leaderboard. Okay, once again, we have Abdullahi on first position in our leaderboard. Let's see your last question, question number 15. The ending of the Hundred Years' War improved economic conditions most in France or Flanders. The ending of the Hundred Years' War improved economic conditions most in France or Flanders. Choose your answer. So the correct answer is France. 92% of majority choose the correct answer. Let's go to our leaderboard. Who who is our top 20 winners? Let's see. Okay, we have Abdullahi on first position in our leaderboard. Then on second place, we have Liesel A. Gabaldon. On third position, we have Emily M. Refugio. On fourth position, we have Alex Xavier Alvarez. And then we have Iguindi Gabriel on fifth position. We have Charlene on sixth position. Then we have Brian on seventh position. And we have Lean Fecunla on eighth position. Then we have Diana on ninth position. We have Sunday Olabodi on 10th position. Then we have Jamaline in 11th position. We have Rosie on 12th position. We have Nilufer in 13th position. Then we have Mary Day placed 14. Then we have Evelyn placed 15. Then we have Trixie on placed 16. We have Mary Grace placed 17. We have Denise placed 18. We have Ashok Kumar Adhikari placed 19, and we have Janeline placed 20. Congratulations to our top 20 winners. Congratulations all of you. I'm very thankful all of you for have your patience and participate here. Thank you so much all of you. You have your certificates in our Facebook page after program. So don't forget to take your certificates and don't forget to share your happiness with us. Okay, my dear lovely participants, this is our webinar number 508, and the topic is teaching linguistic in literature class. And today we have our honorable speaker from India, Dr. Samhiha Bharadwaj. Thank you once again to our speaker. And my dear lovely participants, to collect your certificates, you have to select this code, and the code is IGP 4871. And our today's topic is, once again, I'm repeating, teaching linguistics in a literature class. Without code, no one is eligible for certificates. With code, you can claim your certificates anytime. So go to our website. You can also go to our website address, and our website address is www.eduigp.com. So go to our website, collect your certificates, and don't forget to share with us. Till then, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a good day to all of you. Goodbye.